Nothing is probably more crucial to the middle class than the cost of mass transit in New York. Today's paper reports that the MTA will seek a fare increase for the second consecutive year, for I think only the second time in like 20 or 25 years. Yet the mayor said today that given the city's budget circumstances, there is no money in the city budget to help reduce a fare increase. The state faces enormous budget problems ahead. What, as mayor, is your view about the MTA fare, the need for a financing structure, and where would the money come from?
Well, look, this is, I want to wait and see what the Ravitch report comes out with. I'm going to see exactly what the MTA is proposing. But I have to tell you, this is another in the drip, drip, drip of challenges facing the middle class and those struggling to make it. We need to be aware that it's a problem. Let me just say a couple of things that I believe. One, I believe that Albany has not done their part. Much of the campaign after the Pataki years, during the Spitzer campaign, was about the idea that the new administration in Albany had to dramatically increase and reverse the diminishment of funds that Albany had sent to Washington, to the MTA. That hasn't happened in any real amount, and I think Albany needs to do a lot more. Secondly, you know, this comes back to a larger question that I think needs to be discussed more in the city. Who is the MTA? Why is it that so much of our fate, so much of our authority, so much of our ability to govern ourselves is tied up in unelected boards and agencies, more often than not created by the state legislature during a bygone era? If you think about what the challenges facing New York City, Lower Manhattan, the Port Authority, the West Side of Manhattan, the MTA, the Penn Station project, a whole bunch of different folks. Ratner, also an unelected state board agency. And now we're talking about a fare increase again by the MTA. We have to have a full-throated conversation in this city about whether these agencies, these boards, this level of diffusing of authority that was created in a different era when we in the city couldn't govern ourselves, couldn't be trusted to govern ourselves, were too corrupt to govern ourselves, whether we should still accept as the premise for all our discussion this notion that we're really powerless as elected officials in New York City, as citizens of New York City, to impact the outcomes here. Someone should be having a conversation about why it is we internalize as an article of faith the Battery Park Authority. Why is it we internalize as an article of faith that if you want to get a liquor license for a neighborhood bar, you've got to go to a state agency to get it applied for? And I think maybe in the context of this discussion, and it's an important one, we have to figure out how to fund mass transit in this city. We have to figure out how to get the federal government off the sidelines. We have to figure out how to take the important discussion that we had about congestion pricing and pivot now to a larger question about whether or not we're getting the federal support and whether infrastructure is being paid for the right way. We should have another conversation. We should also realize that in days going by, maybe it was Albany that were the adults and we were the children. Now it's reversed. Now the city has shown we can govern on big problems, and this should be one of them. And I believe the city should fight much harder to get more control or outright control of the MTA, at least as it affects our riders.